Hey, everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it's time for
Scandal Fall. It's fall. UnSpun.
You don't like fall?
I like summer. I hate when summer ends. Makes me sad.
You know what?
Fall in Vancouver means rain.
Yeah,
forever.
we're the same person. I get sad. I get sad after Labor Day for a minute, and then I realize, oh, actually, September and October are really nice. It's November, December, January, and February that I struggle with. Yeah, March is okay because we see signs of spring and we're talking cherry blossoms and stuff. Anyway, we can go. I agree with you. And my Brian loves fall, like loves it. He's a pumpkin spice vibe, and but he doesn't.
Had this conversation before.
He loves a pumpkin pie. Anyway,
I don't mind pumpkin pie. I don't like pumpkin in my coffee.
Oh, he doesn't put pumpkin in his coffee. I should be mindful of what I say. He just loves Halloween. He's born in early November and sweater weather. He loves sweater weather. Can we start by just talking a little bit of U.S. politics here? Did you watch the debate, the Republican, the GOP debate? What do you think?
A little bit. I was working on some stuff last night, so no. I'll say no. I watched a bit of it, but highlights. It's interesting. I mean, it's just like, where's Trump? Hello. It's like, so what's the point?
And you add up all of those candidates who were on that debate stage that Donald Trump did not attend. It should disqualify you if you don't debate. I think this is bizarro land. But that's just me. All of the candidates for the GOP nomination for the presidential election up on that stage last night combined trail Trump by 20 points in the polls.
Yeah. So therefore, no show. I mean, from a public relations and a spin point of view, it's really so counterintuitive to what we think would happen, which would be there'd be a backlash, but not.
You'd also think there'd be a backlash to the fact that, and somebody might bring up his 91 indictments, including the civil suit that was brought against him. He can no longer own a business in New York.
Yeah, two things that and the fact that the judge will be the judge that he tried to get booted out happened today. It's just like the guy can't win except the presidency and the nomination potentially.
It's like, terrifying. This really feels reminiscent of 2016 to me. It feels reminiscent of it. Because people are indoctrinated in a way that are like nobody cares. The Trump supporters will continue. It will have to be Taylor Swift will be able to change things, though. If Taylor Swift can activate the young voters to vote, that could be the difference.
Classic. Get the young voters out. So always a fun.
Did you see what happened with Taylor Swift and Kelsey, Travis Kelce, and his jerseys? Did you see what happened? Like in one NFL game. So Taylor Swift is in Travis Kelce's box with his mom. You know, Travis Kelce is one of the brothers that were in the Super Bowl last year when it was the Eagles versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And it was this unique situation where this mother had two sons going up against each other for, right. Here's my sportscaster self. So we kind of got to know the mom in this before.
Sports. Anyways, go ahead.
Come along on the journey with me.
Come along for the ride.
I'll arm you so you can sound like you know what the hell you're talking about when next somebody brings that
story of my life.
You do it for me for politics. So here we go. Right. So these two brothers, we got to know the mother because her story was one of like, who do you root for and how does this play out for you? And she was like the media darling before last year's Super Bowl. Well, fast forward to the first Monday Night Football and kaboom, there's Taylor Swift up in the box wearing Travis's jersey and, celebrating his win and all of when he made a great play and whatever. She was like screaming and yelling and dancing. And it was the Taylor Swift show. This woman changes the GDP of the cities that she goes to with her concert. I just like to point that out. Like she actually does shift the whole landscape. So in that one game, the next day, Travis Kelce jersey sales went up 400%. Like Swifties want all of the things. And if Taylor Swift, which she did in her documentary, which was actually released 4 years ago, I think now,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even more. When she in her documentary said, you know what, I got to stand up for, and it was women's health rights and access to abortion, that, and in her home state, where she was talking about being more public and more political, and her family, her father in particular, were like, you do not need to bring this heat to you, girl. And she's like, you know what, I have to. I have to, because it's misrepresenting me and Christian values, because she identifies as a Christian, and the way the politicization of things. So that is now going viral again. That's why I bring all of this up, is Taylor Swift's documentary mention of years ago has just surfaced for people to be like, she's actually getting political. And I was like, well, it was a few years ago, but sure.
I will give, like Oprah did it with Obama. I think there's an opportunity for that kind of celebrity status to have an impact on a candidate. But I really don't think you're going to change the entire electoral system and get young people out. You might get it up by a percentage or 2%, which would have a huge impact, because they might have, they would maybe vote Democrat, but not necessarily. If she gets the young vote out, that vote is split as well, as you know. So,
well, like Susan Sarandon did with Bernie Sanders. Right.
Yeah, but
everybody blames Susan Sarandon for splitting the vote and Trump in the first place.
Yes, but the vote that gets the most, is the boomer vote, that 45 plus. That's who shows up. That's who decides. This is really a decision in America for women about what they want to do in the next election, and the multicultural people of color. Those are the two that. And if you look at Canada, Poilievre courting that vote as well. He knows.
Well, he's certainly having a better time of it now, because race is definitely a subject matter right now in Canada after
and he is working it.
Let's just explain it for people who maybe don't know.
Go ahead.
Volodymyr Zelensky comes to Canada for the first time. He has appeared by video, but he's never actually stood in the House. He did. And you kind of have to have been living under a rock for the last week. It was last Monday where a man was honored as a World War II veteran, a guest of the Speaker of the House, the Honorable Mr. Rota, now former Speaker of the House, as his guest. Turns out he's a Nazi, a 98-year-old Nazi.
Easily Googled, by the way.
Standing ovation with Vladimir Zelensky giving it, it's a absolute shit show of bad publicity for our country on a global scale. But wow, who wins here, George?
Well, first of all, whoever the staff person that recommended this guy comes is the one that's must be feeling a bit rough, and then the politician, in general sense here, because this is the process. Generally, staff make recommendations. The politician, especially at this level, goes, "Okay, great." Politician doesn't do their research and think about, who are these people. They trust their staff. Politician gets in trouble. Politician resigns. Big issue, PR issue. Prime Minister apologizes in this case. Late, slowly.
Trudeau's never met a story that he's gotten ahead of, eh? He's never gotten ahead of a thing.
But Poilievre is ahead of this one, and he's eaten Trudeau's lunch on this issue, and it's brutal. And not that I'm saying against Poilievre, but I think that from a spin point of view and public relations point of view, Trudeau did not need this hit right now. He's crashing and burning right now, and any opportunity that Poilievre has, on this issue, where there's an assumption that this would, wow, it's bad. It's bad for Trudeau, and I can't see any way for Trudeau out of this. We've talked about this a little bit before about a leadership race. I've said he has to do it. You gotta, otherwise you're doomed. You're gonna end up out. And
he's pulling down the party pretty hard here, pulling down the whole brand, which, if we could shift to the BC political landscape and the hit that the BC former BC Liberal Party has taken, changing names. You've said it all the way along. You're like, what? Terrible idea. And now the Conservatives surging on the federal level, helping the Conservatives surge on a provincial level with the same, frankly, because people think, oh, BC Conservatives, that's Pierre Poilievre. It's not. But that's what the Liberals enjoyed. The BC Liberals enjoyed the mushy middle voter going, oh, well, they must be liberal, right? No, a Conservative party and then trying to dance in the middle. Well,
yeah, there were lots of federal Liberals in the provincial Liberal Party that Gordon Campbell courted and brought in.
Okay, let's just be frank. Come on. At the root, they're not federal liberal BC Liberals. It was a sparkly thing that very much worked to attract the middle that the Liberals need to win.
I would say that the original BC Liberal Party that Gordon Campbell.
I'm not talking original. I'm talking about the BC Liberal Party that changed their name. They changed their name.
So Jazz Johal put a tweet out there. I sent it to you earlier a couple of days ago. Showed some stats on the timing of this. April they changed the name. May. This is what I've said, and you and I've talked about this, and this is something that, from a marketing point of view, if you're going to do something that significant, change your name. You need to have, because as a marketer, this is something. It's a big deal to change your logo, to change your name. It's like there has to be a really expensive strategy to inform your consumers in the case of product marketing or brand marketing. In the case of a party, same thing. You still have to do that. You have to have a process and spend a shitload of money to get that brand into people's brains. Doesn't just go in naturally. The arrogance of thinking that, oh, well, people will come with us is ridiculous. That's the point. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
The arrogance, George, around the assumption that everybody's paying attention to you.
Well, and that's all politicians, not just the BC Liberals. I think you live in a little vacuum sometimes when you're elected, and it's really hard sometimes to get yourself out of that vacuum to understand how you are perceived in public. I don't care what politician you are, and it sometimes should be easier in opposition to have a good tap into the electorate, because you're not having to make the tough decisions. You're not, you do have to kind of live in a bit of a vacuum when you're in office as the party in power or person in power, because otherwise you could get pulled apart, and you have to kind of stand up for your what you want to get done in a period of time. And usually, and we'll talk about Vancouver in a bit, you got to get that scary stuff done. You can't do everything. You can't do nothing.
But you kind of got to tell people what you plan to do on a grand scale, which often we hear at the UBCM.
Yeah. Well, the NDP didn't come with any goodies, and they didn't do much at UBCM. And and then I saw the story. I think it was Rob Shaw wrote an article in the Orca.
Remember that?
And now owned by the Glacier, I believe.
Yeah.
He wrote an article about the UBCM, and he pointed out that that the argument why no mayors kind of came out and said, where's our gifts? What's happening? Why didn't you do anything at UBCM? Is that the Premier-Eby has been working the rounds, going to these 30 communities across the province, listening, and but listening is great, and task force, wonderful. But at some point, you got to make some decisions and get done. You got to get going, and we are well into a mandate here, and Eby's had time now to do. Where's the big decisions being made, and the big decisions are the ones that can be quite controversial, that you have to then potentially get people to come back to you if they're really tough. He's pushed what he's done in the most recent stuff. Eby's pushing the cities. You got to build these houses. You got to build this stuff. I'm going to make you build. Yet I don't see any okay, sure, let's blame the cities who, and
well, they did the naughty and nice list, and they are rewarding the cities that are actually hitting their targets. It was interesting to see who is and isn't. It didn't quite fit the narrative that everybody is failing. And in fact, there was I looked at some of the numbers and thought, oh, good. Okay. But also looking at the ones where you're like, well, that doesn't surprise me. Oak Bay, that doesn't surprise me. Like West Van. Oh my good God. Don't even get me started about the sidewalk beside the elementary school that was approved through council. This is a curveball for you. I don't know if you saw, I was just losing my mind about this last week. There's a gravel path next to the school, next to the elementary school in West Vancouver. And it had gone through council. It had been approved. The sidewalk was being built. And the NIMBYs came back and said, we don't need a sidewalk. It's safe just the way it is. And I thought to myself, are you absolutely kidding me right now? Are you kidding me? Because the people in the NIMBY neighborhood don't want a sidewalk there, because then parents will then drop their children off on that side of the school, and they don't want any more cars and more traffic on their road beside the. And I'm like, we are in an upside down world where the same council that then gets overruled are putting in separated bike lanes. The argument is we need concrete for cyclists, but we're not even putting 1 second. We're not even putting a goddamn sidewalk in next to the elementary school. Like, we've lost the plot, guys. We've lost the plot. Oh, we don't want sidewalks in West Vancouver. Oh my God. Okay, time for you to move to a rural community. West Vancouver is downtown. It's downtown.
Have you seen Horseshoe Bay? The bike lane in Horseshoe Bay? You ever noticed it? It's got giant flower pots in the middle of it.
Yes.
I mean, I kind of think it's hilarious, but also, why? Beautiful bike lane, and they put giant concrete flower pots right in them all the way along it, like that is in your face against cyclists right there. We built you something beautiful, cyclists, but we're gonna put some flower pots in it.
It's wild,
like, man. Got pictures of bikes on it.
Anyway, I totally meandered. I apologize. I meandered on that. I did. I struggle. I struggle with some of the policies and some of the things that are talking out of one side of your mouth and then like, okay, let's talk about view cones. We're talking about view cones again, George.
Yeah, and this is an issue that I always worry about. This whole debate, they're using it as okay, let's assess these view cones because it's impacting development. And I'm going, really? Is it okay? There's a couple that they probably get rid of, but view cones are actually a pretty important part of how our city looks, not from every angle that you go at it. And so the way this city hall can be seen from every certain angle from downtown, I think it's a kind of an important aspect of what makes Vancouver beautiful. I don't want walls of towers everywhere. And believe me, I love towers. I think they're the greatest thing
build it up guy.
For getting build it high. Let's go high.
Yep.
But I'm getting a little tired of Vancouver City Council focusing on all these things and still not getting really much done. They've approved that 6-story, the whole, massive. This is a big decision. Yet there's no plan to really push it fast, like to build all these potential 3-story walk-ups, that kind of walk-ups, smaller buildings across the city now, anywhere you want, basically, in a kind of way. It's a massive redevelopment or rezoning of the city that they did, which is and very little pushback, But now that could be the one thing they did in a 4-year term, because then the second phase is really how fast can we get these things built. Now, now that should be our priority, not view cones and spending all this time doing this stuff. Every time you get staff to do a report and to do a task force and to do this and to do that, it slows everything else down. If you want more housing,
only one staff.
If you want more housing, and you've made a big decision, good job. Now, it's like their decision on taxes that they made last term for business. Okay, but then you scared off all the businesses through a whole bunch of other stuff. You have to focus on what you're trying to achieve. You cannot do everything. And photo ops won't win you the next election. At the end of the day, if your tax comes back at 10% and you have not one, and this is, a park board issue, but it's going to come down to the city. Where's the new pools? Why are the potholes?
I couldn't get into my pool this year.
Why are the potholes on Ontario still like ridiculous?
First time in almost 15 years, I could not get into kids' pool this year. I could not get in.
Ridiculous.
Every time I looked in, it was empty. Because they clear the whole pool and they make people line up, and then you get to go in for 45 minutes, and then they line up people and they clear the pool. It's not COVID anymore. It's
how much
these
money
are the things
is set aside to build a pool in the West End and in Marpole. Almost 115 million, I think, for set aside. This is money that's already put aside that's going to be taken away from the park board. But the city's involved in this too. It has to be a cooperative relationship.
Can they not, do they not have a place for them?
Yes, they do.
Then why aren't we doing it?
Marpole plans there, and the West End plan it's just a matter of getting it done. It's just not getting done, and that's a park board issue. But the community center plan, let's go. Let's get that pool built in Marpole. There's 2 pools ready to go. Meanwhile, over in the southeast Vancouver, nothing's happening. The most developable area of the city, no community plan, no strategy, nothing. Upper Kits, no plan, no strategy. Like,
can we talk about the city planner who's gonzo? Like another one? What's her name?
Well, I don't know what to tell you. She was let go, I believe, as far as I understand. Surprising.
A big
not a lot
job
of information about it, but it's it wasn't like she was controversial. So I don't usually that means there was internal issues, but
she was coming in on the I'm going to fast track and speed up the permitting process. And I guess was she cut because somebody had to take the blame on it, or because it's not faster, it's not improved, it's not better. This whole 1 week, 2 week, 5 weeks, 8 weeks, or whatever the hell it was, it's not.
Yeah. Here's the difference between Vancouver,
and it's an absolute goddamn nightmare.
Here's the difference between two cities that I understand. There's Vancouver, who keeps changing the rules and changing the guidelines and changing, adding, building, putting this, conflicting policies. Builders are going, what am I supposed to do? And staff are going, they can't even understand how to approve stuff. Burnaby hasn't changed much at all, ever. Like
they go to Burnaby, look at the towers. CAC. All you have to do is look on the other side of Boundary Road, and you're like, oh, they've figured it out. Geez, I wonder what it's like over there.
Yeah, they have a set CAC program. Like that's a community amenity contribution. It's based on land value. It's like a really simple process. They have no plan. They have a real push to build social housing in Burnaby right now. That's about the only thing they've done differently. Generally, though, yeah, you look at and then you go to the smaller towns can push things faster, of course.
I love Ladner.
Where they can approve stuff faster.
I would love to see Kitsilano rip a page out of Ladner. It's so great. Like, come on now. You want to know what should be, and I wouldn't say the Jericho lands because that's a different animal, but when there are spaces, when there are pieces of city property that are sitting empty at a time where we are in such high need, like, do something. Do something. The nothing is just so frustrating. And do we need to hold space for Cirque du Soleil? I don't think so. Build that. Why is that not built all around False Creek? Why is that not built up?
Well, the viaducts.
Why isn't it?
The viaducts.
Right. So, but then don't tear down the viaducts and build the things. It's been decades.
Well, I don't think Concord Pacific is particularly interested in building right now in Vancouver, in this area. It's just until the viaducts are dismantled, which somebody has to do that. It's going to cost, well, it was projected 200 million. It's more like 600 million.
We can't build a museum
and nobody wants
to
pay for that.
$1 billion.
Who's going to pay for that? You? Are you paying for that?
You know what? We're all paying for it. We're all paying for it right now because nobody has any place to live. Honestly.
Okay, but does that mean you're willing to spend the city of Vancouver to take money?
I never promised anybody that I was taking down the viaducts. I don't know where people are going to go.
It's approved.
People, but exactly. But more sparkly things, George. Like let's fight in circles. Let's fight in circles. Things that get approved. Hold on. Can you ask me a question? I'm going to answer it. If things are going to be approved, there should be a deadline for them to actually be implemented, or we just stop this whole process of approving shit that doesn't happen.
Well, sure, but you have elections and new councils get in. So I approved when I was there, except I voted against most of it because I didn't believe the numbers, the viaducts. New council comes in, don't do anything. COVID hits. New council comes in, another new council, focused on other issues, not focused on that. The real estate deals around the viaduct coming down are significant. We require untangling all of that. So there's that. The city would have to think about that. So right now, a microcosm of that, if you've been to Vancouver, is the mini viaduct when you come off the Granville Street Bridge. That was a project that I was involved in as far as a councillor, where we approved that to happen. But the deal was we'd get the developers to pay for it. Every single developer said, I'm not paying for that. You take them down. And so that's the exact same. So it costs the city, I think it's $25 million to remove a little teeny roundabout. And
then how much does the city make off the developer when they build the huge building?
But that doesn't matter. Sure, of course. But as a taxpayer, do I want to do I want you as a politician
But when
to
we make
spend
some money back, when we have the
20
buildings there, because this is 10, 15, 20 years of no buildings there. So how much have we lost
okay, but
in
okay, just
cost to the
let me
city?
finish. Let me finish. $25 million for that. If it's 300 or $400 million to take if the same situation to take the viaducts down is happening, which I think it is, it's say 400 million to remove those. City has to borrow $400 million. Interest on $400 million alone at say 10%, we have to pay the interest, even if they just pay the principal. They just pay the principal of the loan. That's a taxpayer of it. $400 million. You do the math. That has to come out of tax into the budget, into the operating budget, because interest is paid to the operating budget on borrowed money. Currently, our interest represents more than, I think it's almost 20% of our budget is paying interest in Vancouver. So you have to, these things don't happen now because they can't get developers to pay for it because it's too expensive.
It's so funny because the whole time you're telling me about $400 million is all I can think of was how angry I got when I was told that one building was going to cost $1 billion in taxpayer money at the provincial level in a new museum. We are sparkly things and taxed and told the why we can't and why we won't and why it isn't. And that brings us back to the original point here, which is when you have people in power, whether it be City Hall or in the legislature or in the House of Commons and in Parliament and in the Prime Minister's office, all of these levels of government are failing people who need places to live. And the reasons why we can't fix it are what we've been talking about for decades that have gotten us worse and worse and worse and worse and worse into it. So instead of everybody coming up with reasons why we can't do things, I would suggest that lands that aren't developed and are being held because the 9 million dominoes need to fall, something needs to change in how those lands are used in the interim. And they must be a place for people to be housed, whether it be temporarily or what. But I think there needs to be a more dynamic conversation about solving some of the problems instead of talking about all the reasons why we can't. That's just me.
Yeah, but it takes money to make stuff happen. So whether you
Yeah,
spend
I pay a
$400 million
lot in
or whether you
taxes.
spend $400 million removing viaducts so you can build about 10 to 15,000 units, or you spend $400 million on temporary housing
Where?
across the city. Well, that's what's happening already. There are lots in
Is
that
it?
area that in the viaducts area, for example, and across the region now, they're putting up these temporary modular homes. You know, that's happening. The province is putting a lot of money into that. But you know, if the city were to go to any city, were to go to the province saying, "Hey, we got this piece of land. It's industrial land or it's whatever, but we can't afford. We want to remediate it or we want to do something to it so that it can be built on because you got to follow some significant process, whatever.
For
We don't have the
sure.
cash. We don't. Can you give us the cash? Can you give us that? Can you pay for this? We'll get, you know, and that's the question. If the city is challenged right now by, and I think that's what is happening on a major project, then they need to think about how can they fund it differently that the taxpayers of Vancouver, because we're not going to benefit
Sure.
necessarily from
There's
it.
a solution. That's a solution-based point. I love that. I love that because
Yes.
I'm looking across Boundary Road and somebody's got to figure it out over there. You know, I'm looking in Richmond. For years, it was just a sea of cranes across Richmond, and now it's all densified. And you go a little bit further south and you see all densified in Ladner, and Tawason's building out. Tawason's building out on lands that for years were controversial. No, it's agricultural land. You'll never build there. Well, they're all building there. It's built. It's being built on, and it's being used. And it was never really agricultural land since I was a tween. That was the last time I saw anything meaningful grown down there. It was a politicized way to fight over things and people to hold space until they could make money off of it in a bigger way. And that's what puts a bad taste in people's mouth, I think, for politicians, as well as, and look what's happening with the Premier of Ontario and the Green Belt, and you know, those back pocket deals and stuff just make the electorate so frustrated when we're watching. And you've said, I think it might have even been our very first Unspun podcast, George, when you were like, why are we not building on city land? Why are we not just building on city land? There's lots of city land. And you're like, we should be doing what Pierre Trudeau did back in the day with the little walk-ups and the da-da-da, and I lived in one of those. I've actually lived in 3 of those, frankly, and I would live in them again if I had to. If I found myself, okay, I need to rent a place, and the bathroom is the size of this table, and the living room is the size of this chair and table, but I got a roof over my head, right? And it's safe, and it's secure, and it doesn't leak, and it's not moldy, and I have a kitchen, and I have I'm close to where I work. These are all the things that I think should be human rights for people.
But if it takes you 4 years to build a 3-story building in Vancouver, you're not going to do it.
It's not worth building. I know, I get you.
How much
and that's
tax
30
incentive
minutes. That's 30. Way to go. How do we follow you, George?
George _ Affleck.
At George
_
Affleck on your Twitter. George is an excellent follow on your TikTok as well. I really enjoy
related.
I enjoy those. Like, your delivery is fabulous. Yeah, it's worth a follow on TikTok. But George Affleck, George _ Affleck on your Twitter, or if you're calling it by what Elon Musk names everything, you can go there. I'm at Jody Vance, Jody with a Y, at Jody Vance, and we'll see you next week for the fastest 30 minutes.
It was fast. I can't believe it. See you later.
I know. I looked up. I'm like, okay, that's 31 minutes. We gotta go.
We went way over last week. Bye.